button. Who's got the buttons? If anyone does, it's certainly my guest, Robin Schrod. Robin is the facilitator of the Northwest Arkansas Button Club. Welcome to Bella Vista and Beyond, Robin. I'm Nancy Noyes. I have to tell the story about how I first met Robin. I was at the Bella Vista Historical Museum when I noticed a temporary exhibit of buttons, of all things. Who knew that buttons could be so absolutely fascinating? I'd never seen anything like it. So I asked museum co-president Zita Lucas about it, and she gave me Robin's name and phone number. I called you, but for the first meeting I was scared to go because I didn't have buttons that looked anything like the ones I had just seen in the display. But go I went, and I had the best time and have learned so much about buttons from you, Robin, and the other club members. It has been a thrilling journey. So Robin, describe exactly what is a button club.
A button club is an organization of all kinds of people, young and old, that want to get together and learn about buttons. It's mainly learning about the history of them, the materials, the designs, who created them. And like I said, it's for all ages.
Cool. Well, so what do we do at our button club meetings when we go?
Well, we have a meeting that's once a month, and we meet for about 2 hours. First, we do a craft with the buttons because, honestly, we have a lot of leftover fun craft buttons. When you open up that grandma's tin of buttons, you'll have some extra ones. So we do a craft first. Then we do a research project. Someone might talk about the materials or the designs, when they were made, the history of them. And then we just have a little bit of discussion, and we're done.
Oh, that sounds great. Well, let's take a look at some of the projects that we've done. So here you see an angel. Again, it's all made out of buttons. And next up we have 3 clowns coming there. Look at that, isn't that cute? And how about the mason jar project that we did? Robin is so creative. She gets these items, a lot of them, at the Dollar Tree, and then redesigns them and retrofits them to make sure that they're fun for everybody. Also, we did an Easter egg for around Easter time. And of course, you can even make a button frame. And there's my husband, Kevin, in the frame, dressed as a pirate. So that was kind of fun. Anyway, we also have a National Button Society, and it has a very nice logo, and that's where members engage in a fascinating journey of discovery involving history, art, and fashion that covers centuries of clothing buttons, usage, as well as related items such as buckles. With a passion for studying, displaying, and trading buttons, members create art, such as this sunflower. I think that's one of the projects we did. And also a flower painting. Isn't that lovely? Then here's one of my favorites. It is a black and white button woman, although she has a little bit of pink tinge to her lips. I love that one. Also, you can make jewelry out of buttons. And here is a bracelet that I bought at one of our button club meetings, and I just love it. It's full of bling, my favorite. So, you know, we always use the clothing buttons without harming them, so that's a really neat thing. So tell us about your experiences with the National Button Society, Robin.
Well, after I retired from teaching, I had a huge box full of buttons from the activities I did in math and science with the students. And I was bored one day and started looking through them, and I realized I had what I thought was military buttons.
Oh.
So I started doing some research online, and I realized there was a National Button Society. Didn't even know it existed. It started in 1938. There are button clubs in almost all the states. There are regional clubs, and there's a national club, of course, related to the Button Society. The has become worldwide. We can communicate with a lot of people in Europe and in Australia, collect buttons. Then basically the National Button Society, like you said, it's committed. We're very committed to preserving the buttons, telling what we have found in the history and the research that we've done about them, and we want to educate people about buttons.
Excellent. Well, let's take a look at some of the different kinds of buttons that you have on cards. First of all, let's look at the celluloid, and there we see it. And those are really distinctive and unusual buttons, I think, don't you?
Yes. The celluloid was one of the first plastics created.
Ah.
But one of the funny things about it, it's very thin plastic, but what they've discovered is it was created because they wanted to coat the pool balls. The man who created celluloid wanted to coat the pool balls in the saloon with something lighter weight.
Ah.
But when they clicked together, it created friction and caused a flame.
Oh.
So it didn't last very long in that world, but it lasted a while in the world of buttons.
Oh, that's interesting, really is. So here's a close-up of one of the celluloid buttons. I thought that was quite spectacular. Now this one of the plane, was that carved onto the button or was it made with a mold?
Most likely it's not a mold. Most likely it was carved and then has the celluloid over it. It's actually called a buff button because it's painted the brown and then they wipe off the brown and the raised parts will have the buff.
Oh, well, that's neat. Oh, let's look at the Bakelite buttons now.
Okay, Bakelite was the second kind of plastic produced. A lot of people collect Bakelite. It was very popular in jewelry for the ladies. You would see the big bangle bracelets and the big earrings. It has very distinct colors that help you find it when you're searching for the Bakelite buttons. And there's a certain way that you can experience and experiment with them and to find out if it's true Bakelite or not. You have to do a little rub test on the back.
Oh, okay. Well, that's neat too. See, I'm learning still about the buttons.
Yeah, we're always learning.
Well, let's take a look at the military buttons now.
Well, like I said, I was finding military buttons, and usually you can always find a military button in a tin or a jar, most likely. But it depends on the date of them and how far back they go. There are websites, and there are definitely collectors that do strictly military buttons. Civil War is one of the big categories for button collecting.
I'll bet.
And you even hear about when people go out in the fields with their
metal detectors?
Yeah. They're finding buttons left and right. Not a lot, but they will find buttons from Civil War. One of the things you have to be careful with is reproductions.
Yes.
And one of the things we learn in our club meetings is how to detect the back side, what might be written on the back to verify the age of the buttons and the authenticity.
Well, cool. That's really neat to know. Well, buttons are made out of all kinds of products, including wood. Let's take a look at some of those now.
Wood can be like you said, all kinds of wood. One of the reasons why wood is a popular button is because that's what people had around them for resources when they couldn't afford to go to the stores to buy the china or the glass buttons.
I see.
The men would carve the buttons for if the wife needed a button for their shirt or their overalls.
So, like on the prairie, they probably did this quite a bit.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, because stores weren't nearby, and you had to
No.
wait for the peddler to come by with his cart
Right,
and,
right.
to do that. Yeah, just great. Well, so what would you say is the history of button collecting? You alluded to when it started. People started collecting buttons, but
Well, the collection probably just started in, I would say, 1930s, around
Yeah.
there. The National Button Society started in 1938, like I said, but there's a couple of historical things that are fun. Buttons have been around for thousands of years, and people would carve different natural resources like shells, rocks, bones, wood, like we just talked about, to if they needed something to hold their garments together. So one fact in history, Queen Victoria was mourning the death of her husband, and she started wearing black buttons, black glass buttons. A lot of people, it was a special material called jet.
Oh.
And so therefore black glass became very popular because of Queen Victoria. So that's a very historical mark. Also, in history, we have history in Arkansas with the pearl buttons. And it started with realizing the mussels in the freshwater rivers, especially the Mississippi River, and then all the feeder rivers that go into the Mississippi have the mussels, and you can stamp the blank pearl from the shells. So that became a very popular industry. And Arkansas in 1880 about started collecting the mussels from the river. But by 1905, the Arkansas Pearl Rush, which you can do research about, on the eastern side of the state, it kind of dissolved and went its wayside because they over-harvested the mussels, and it caused some extinction and endangered species. Now, one of the biggest areas for mother of pearl and shell buttons is Muscatine, Iowa, along the Mississippi, and they actually have a museum to go to.
Oh, cool.
And can I tell you one more thing?
Please do.
Okay. So this right here is called a charm string. Now, who do you think might want a charm string?
What about a young bride, maybe?
Oh, maybe a bride. But the young girls, back in the day, the late 1800s, they didn't really have things to collect like Pokemon cards or the little dolls like we do today. They had buttons that were ornately made, and the girls would want something new and special and pretty. So they began to string their buttons. If people brought them gifts, it would be a button, and it would be maybe for their birthday party or for a Christmas gift or just a friendship. You'd exchange some buttons. So the girls would start stringing the buttons, and rumor has it that they definitely called them a charm string. But rumor has it that if she reached 999 buttons, the 1,000th button would come from her suitor that would ask her to marry him. So that's the rumor that is going around about charm strings. Now, charm strings, this is a mock-up of one. I put one together. It's not authentic, but it just shows you how the charm strings can be made.
That's a lovely tradition. Don't you think so?
Oh, I think we should still do it.
I do too. I think it's lovely. That's a great idea. So, you talked about the pearl and the shell buttons. What should we look for in antique buttons? You talked about the backs of buttons. Is there anything else?
Well, look-fors would be, for sure, you start with whether or not the button has mold marks, a line around the edge, and that would tell you if it does have a mold mark. It would tell you if it was modern manufacturing.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The next thing you look for is you look at the two of the same kind, or maybe a card of 4 or 5, and are they exactly the same, or are they a little bit different? If they're a little bit different, that means they're unique, and they are vintage of some sort. You also always turn over the back side of a button to see how the back is created, what kind of shanks there are on the back, whether or not the shanks will definitely tell you an age to the button or the style that it was made. You also look at the back of the button. You look for not necessarily very smooth, but maybe some ripples in the back might tell you the age is more, because that's the imperfections from being handmade. Okay,
Yeah.
and the textures, the designs can tell you the age of the buttons, like the celluloid. Celluloid's not made now, but that would tell you the age of the buttons.
Yes. Well, I was interested in this old-fashioned shoe button. I thought that was really great. Could we see the picture of that? Yes, there it is. So tell us a little bit about the old-fashioned shoe buttons. They came in all colors, apparently, according to the card that you made
They
here.
did. And well, you have to have a button hook. And both
there it
men
is,
and women needed to have the shoes with the buttons. The fancier, the better. Now, one thing to also keep in mind, too, that even gloves, ladies' gloves had buttons. And you can get button hooks for the gloves. Men's gloves, too, most likely, might have them. So for the shoe buttons, size does matter. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, so how do you display or keep your buttons? You know, what's, I know you don't keep them all just in a button jar or anything like that, or you might before you've sorted them, but these cards are just gorgeous. Tell us about them.
The Button Club and the National Button Society teaches you how to mount we call it mounting the buttons on the cards. We use mat board, basically, that you get from framing shops. You can get it from the framing shops. You can also order it on Amazon. The Button Society likes the size 12 by 9, 9 by 12 in any color, because that's what the competition cards are sized. But as you can see, I have different sizes. You can display them and frame them for your home in any way you want. I display them by material, what they were made of, like the glass, all glass, or china, or I display them by a theme, like the military buttons or the shoe buttons. And the holiday buttons, we have one right here from Valentine's Day with the heart buttons. So you can do all kinds of different themes for your button card. Now the one in front here with the grapes, that's going to be for a competition card that I can tell you about a little bit later. I also have put them on boards by color, so you could have a all red glass if you want, for example. I also have brought something to show you how we get them on the board. So a corn cob holder is a perfect tool for punching when you turn it over and you punch the holes in the board for the wire to go through. And the second part is we want to have a special kind of wire. I have learned that it's basically telephone wire. So this is how I purchased it. Someone has cut it nicely, got it ready for us in the tube. It's very thin copper wire coated in plastic, very bendable, and it can go through the shanks, it can go through the holes, and then on the back we twist it tight just to hold the button on. So that's how we display it.
Sounds good. Well, I'm just amazed that the corn cob holder, is the exact specification for fitting that button holes.
Who would have thought?
I know, that is just so incredible. So, and so I noticed that you brought all of your buttons display here. Can you tell us more about them? Like, what about the nuts or the moon glows? Those be really interesting to know about.
So, would you believe we do have buttons made from different kinds of nuts from around the world. There are actually coconut buttons, and you can tell a coconut button by it's a dark chocolate on the back side with little marks, and they can be carved easily. Then we also have a kind of button called vegetable ivory, and vegetable ivory comes from South America, and it's from a nut called the tagua nut.
Oh.
And it's a very small, looks very small, like an avocado growing in the tree, but it's a huge bunch.
Oh.
So picture a huge bunch of avocados, but it's a tagua nut growing up in the tree, and then they cut them off. And it is an industry still.
Oh.
Vegetable ivory buttons are still made today, and there's a specific way that you can learn how to tell a vegetable ivory button. So that's from a nut.
How big are the tagua? You said avocados. Are they the size of an avocado?
Yes.
Or are they larger, smaller?
They're about, the average size is about an avocado size,
okay.
but they'll be clustered in a big clump.
Yes, I see.
And it'll be on something like a palm tree, but they go through and harvest them off.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So you were talking about the competition buttons, and tell us a little bit more about your grape competition card. I think that's going to be interesting.
Well, if you can see the front, yeah, okay, then we have a picture. So a competition card is created based upon the award written for the button show. So it can be a theme, it can be a material, it can be a size. The award is written, it'll tell you specifically how many you need, if it is one kind of material, and just the different specifications. So the grape button that they showed you, it has different materials on there. There are celluloid, there's brass, there's steel cup buttons, there's painted buttons, there's ceramic buttons, there's even one called a clam broth.
Oh.
So the more materials you have, the more points you'll get for your board.
I see.
And the older the buttons, the more points you'll get for your board. So I'm hoping to present this one at the National Show in August.
Well, you can't have any duplicates, I guess, either, can you?
No, you can't.
They all have to be original and unique buttons.
Unique, right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, gosh. Well, that's great. So, it's so interesting. And do you want to talk about an upcoming show that you're going to have in Springdale?
Okay. The Button Club would like to get the word out about collecting buttons, and that we have a club that meets. The Springdale Public Library is going to allow us to do a whole wall of our cards and our crafts. This will be in the month of October, so we're prepping for that to get ready to do a wall at the Springdale Public Library. Our first experience was at the History Museum, like you said, like you saw.
That really inspired me, I'll tell you.
So we want to get out and let the word be known that buttons are unique and special, and basically anybody can collect buttons.
Sure they can, absolutely. Well, and that brings up a point too, is that these cards that you've created and other club members create as well, I mean, they're works of art. In addition to having all of these incredibly unique buttons, they're beautiful to look at, and I like the idea of framing them or maybe even the charm string. I'd love to wear that as a necklace sometime, or my bracelet that I have made out of buttons. So it's all so much fun. And another thing that I didn't realize was about the craft buttons. And we made beautiful items with the craft buttons, and they can be used as gifts or just for your home decor. There's so much to button collecting, and I never knew. I never imagined. So, and I'm glad I went. I really am, because it's just a lot of fun. So anyway, what are some of your favorite button cards or buttons, period?
Well, my favorite is called Twinkles.
Oh, yes.
Now, that's an interesting name. It's a kind of a nickname they've given to a certain kind of metal button. I'm sorry that I don't have any here today to show you, but it's a metal button with a metal backing and a pierced metal design on the top. So it's a back and a front, but they have a shiny layer that has been laid on the back, and it's on the inside.
Is it like tin foil or
it's
something
kind of like
that?
tin foil,
Oh,
yes.
okay.
And it can be different colors. It can be gold. I've seen some red and some blue. And when you hold it, it will sparkle.
Oh.
So you probably might like that,
I think I would.
But I like it, and that's where it got the nickname Twinkle.
Yeah.
And one of the history stories that when you do the research about buttons, one of the stories for Twinkle is that ladies really wanted to have that on their dress, because then it would catch the eye of the gentleman in the room if they were a little bit of sparkle on them.
Of course it would.
Yes. So another one I like is called China Calicos, and it's basically a calico china, and they also have stencils on them too. But the calicos have a painted design to match the fabric of pioneer women dresses, the calicos that they would wear, and so there is history behind that. As you can tell, I love the history.
Me too.
And so the calicos can still be found. They're not made still, but you can still find them. And there's an interesting story, a boat, I forget the name, I'm sorry, it begins with an A, but there was a steamboat that crashed or sank in the river near Kansas City, full of crates of calico buttons, and now they have a museum that can show you those buttons to visit.
How fun. That is great. Well, speaking of the buttons and searching for buttons, what are buttons worth?
They're worth whatever you're willing to pay for them.
Well, that makes sense.
The average button that people collect is less than $50, basically. Now, a lot of people do pay money for special buttons.
Yeah.
They do pay extra money. I found some examples to tell you about. For example, presidential inaugural buttons. Now, we're not talking about the pins.
Right.
We're talking George Washington timed, in that era, that he would have special buttons made for his coats. And those buttons have been known to sell for, they were from 1789, his presidential button, and it sold for $2,750 in year 2018 at an auction.
Just for one button?
Yes. Then, like I told you before, the Civil War buttons are very popular for collectors. Especially the men love the military collections of all sorts. So the buttons, one of them had at an auction a 40-piece set, and I really honestly don't know what it looked like, but it was probably all the ranks of the different uniforms, and I'm not sure if it was North or South. But it sold for $2,000, this 40-piece set, in 2012. And another one, then another category is luxury buttons. And one group of luxury buttons that had diamonds and rubies on it sold for $20,000 at a Christie auction.
Was that a set of buttons?
Yes, that
Oh.
was a set of only 13 buttons that time.
Oh, gosh, that's incredible. Well, it's wonderful to know. Well, so what would you recommend for a new button collector or somebody that was just interested in getting started collecting buttons?
Well, I would say ask your grandma,
Oh, yeah.
ask your aunties if they have saved any kind of buttons. You'd be surprised at what they have in their sewing baskets and in their drawers, or in a tin or in a jar. That can get you exploring and looking at different sizes, different colors, different materials. You can go to thrift stores, antique malls, antique stores. We'll have the tins, old cookie tins full, and button jars, mason jars full.
Yeah.
A lot of time, though, the elite collectors go online and buy their buttons
Sure.
from
Absolutely.
special dealers.
Well, the last thing I'd like for you to talk about is this wonderful sweater that you have on here. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, it's basically, I'm on Pinterest all the time, and I saw this idea. I also sew, of course, and so I found a site that showed different ways to sew on your buttons. There's probably 50 different ways to sew on a button. And this is a very inexpensive sweatshirt, and they do tell you how to create little jackets from sweatshirts on some of the Pinterest sites. So you just cut it up the middle, you sew it back, you cut off the cuff, you use colorful thread, you buy your buttons that are the same kind, only different colors,
Yes.
and you decorate.
Well, it is stunning. So I'd like to thank my wonderful guest, Robin Schrod, for sharing her stunning button collection for Bella Vista and beyond. I was amazed at how many button collectors there are nationwide and the number of wonderful projects that members do with their buttons. Now, I think you have a button that you'd like to show.
Oh, I do. I have a special one.
Now, that is a button. Isn't that great? So be sure to tune into my show, Bella Vista and Beyond, on YouTube anytime. Search Bella Vista Community TV, then Bella Vista and Beyond. My new shows are taped every second Wednesday of the month. And you never know what fascinating things we'll talk about next. Till then, believe and succeed. I'm Nancy Noyes for Bella Vista and Beyond. Thank you for watching.